When we speak of an empath, we are not describing a personality quirk or a social label, but a way of existing that touches the very core of human experience. To be an empath is to live with the invisible membrane between yourself and others stretched thin, sometimes even torn open. It is to breathe in not only your own feelings, but the moods, sorrows, and unspoken tensions that drift through the atmosphere of every room. What most people pass by unnoticed, the empath feels as vividly as their own heartbeat. This sensitivity is not an ornament, it is the scar of a wound. Many empaths were shaped in homes where affection was uncertain, where safety depended on reading every subtle shift in a parent's face or tone. The child who learns to survive this way becomes an adult who feels more than most can bear. Out of the ashes of neglect, a strange gift arises, a heart that can resonate with others at a depth so profound it borders on the sacred. Yet what makes the empath luminous is also what makes them vulnerable. Their openness unsettles those who have built their lives behind thicker walls. While the empath is compelled to meet life with unguarded sincerity, others may view such rawness as threatening. To encounter an empath is to be reminded of the depth of one's own soul, and many are unprepared for such a reminder. The empath, then, is both gift and paradox, carrying within them a tenderness born of pain, a light born from fracture. They live in a world where boundaries blur, where intimacy is constant, and where every connection carries both possibility and risk. This is not a weakness. It is the mark of a soul that has survived the breaking open and has chosen to remain receptive, even when it would have been easier to harden. Envy is among the most corrosive forces in human relationships, not because it desires what you have, but because it resents that you have it at all. Where jealousy still longs to possess, envy longs to extinguish. It looks upon radiance and feels threatened, as though another's light exposes the shadows it has carefully hidden. For the empath, this truth cuts deeply. The very gift that allows them to shine can stir in others a darkness they will never admit, even to themselves. Rarely does envy appear openly. It hides in small gestures, in the faint pause before words of support, in laughter that carries a sharp undertone, in the sudden withdrawal of warmth after a moment of intimacy. It can dress itself in affection, wrapping its hostility in the language of care. A partner may smile and call you too sensitive, insisting it is a joke. Yet beneath the surface lies the wish that your sensitivity would dim so their own emptiness is less visible. This is why envy is so insidious. It does not stride into the room announcing itself. It creeps. It slithers through tone, timing, and silence, eroding trust grain by grain until the bond feels fragile, but no clear cause can be named. To those who love an empath, the brightness of that sensitivity becomes unbearable, for it reminds them of what they cannot or will not face within themselves. Instead of celebrating that light, they seek to obscure it, to make the empath smaller, so their own discomfort can remain hidden. For the empath, recognizing envy in this subtle form is essential. To mistake it for playfulness or affection is to invite slow sabotage into the very heart of love. The poison of envy works not by outright attack, but by gradual erosion until the empath, bewildered, begins to question whether their very nature is somehow too much. There are moments when what is offered as love carries a hidden sting. For the empath, this betrayal is especially piercing because it arrives wrapped in tenderness. A partner may reach for your hand, speak words of devotion, or smile warmly, and yet beneath these gestures runs a current that seeks to diminish you. Affection becomes the mask envy wears. It is not love in its truest sense, but a covert strategy to quiet the radiance that unsettles them. It reveals itself in subtle dismissals, laughter at your earnest emotions, silence when you most need encouragement, or casual remarks that frame your depth as exaggeration. You're overreacting, they say. You take everything too seriously. What they mean, though often unconsciously, is that your sensitivity disturbs them because it shines a light into places they themselves avoid. Your openness becomes their discomfort, your sincerity their shame. This is why the empath often feels caught in confusion. How can the same lips that whisper affection deliver wounds that cut so deeply? How can devotion and sabotage coexist? The answer lies in the unconscious tension of envy. When your presence exposes another's poverty of spirit, they may not know how to reconcile admiration with resentment. They love what you give, yet they hate that it reveals their own lack. Love disguised as sabotage is not love at all. It is fear in costume. And unless it is recognized for what it is, the empath risks carrying not only their own pain, but also the burden of another's unacknowledged shadow. What feels like intimacy then becomes a slow erosion of the very qualities that make the empath whole. Behind every empath's luminous gift lies a childhood marked by fracture. Many empaths were once children in homes where love came with conditions, or where affection was absent altogether. In such an environment, safety depended not on being carefree, but on becoming hyper-aware. The child learned to scan every room, to anticipate the slightest change in a parent's tone or expression, because survival demanded it. What begins as vigilance slowly becomes identity. The child trains themselves to feel what others feel before those others even recognize it. They learn to appease, to absorb, to soothe storms before they break. What was once a desperate adaptation evolves into an extraordinary capacity for compassion, a sensitivity that others perceive as almost otherworldly. But the paradox is unavoidable. The same wound that gave rise to empathy also left the scar of vulnerability. In adulthood, this radiant gift draws people near, but it also unsettles them. Those who have not faced their own depths may drink eagerly from the empath's well of compassion, yet secretly resent the mirror it holds up to their emptiness. Thus, the empath's wound becomes both blessing and burden, a survival strategy reborn as grace, and yet always carrying the memory of pain. To understand the empath, then, is to see both sides of this inheritance. Their gift is not chosen but forged, not learned but lived through suffering. It is the paradox of light that shines only because it first passed through darkness, of love that exists only because it once knew abandonment. This wound-turned gift is the essence of the empath's path, shaping every bond they enter and every shadow they must eventually face. Within the story of every empath lives an archetype as old as myth itself, the wounded healer. This figure carries a paradox. Their capacity to heal emerges precisely because they have been hurt. Out of their own fracture rises a power to sense, to comfort, to restore. And yet, the same wound that grants this gift also acts like a beacon, drawing to them those who are not seeking love in its fullness, but refuge from their own emptiness. For the wounded healer, relationships often begin with reverence. Others are drawn to the warmth, to the rare ability to listen without judgment, to hold emotion without flinching. But beneath this attraction lies a hunger, These companions or lovers want to drink from the empath's sensitivity, to bask in their light, yet they do so without acknowledging its cost. What begins as closeness soon reveals itself as dependency. And dependency, when mixed with envy, turns dangerous. Those who cannot generate their own inner fire will, consciously or not, seek to borrow it. They may approach under the guise of devotion, but their true desire is not to walk beside the empath, it is to feed upon them. And once filled, they resent the very presence that exposed their hunger in the first place. The wounded healer must face this truth: their gift is not inexhaustible. Without discernment, their openness can become an invitation for exploitation. This archetype, when unconscious, leaves the empath in a cycle of being adored, consumed, and then diminished. But when brought to awareness, it offers another possibility to heal not only others, but first themselves, and to recognize that their light is meant to shine freely, not to be siphoned away. In the dream world of the psyche, false love often reveals itself through haunting images. One such vision is that of a grand banquet, long tables adorned with silverware, laughter echoing through a hall, promises of abundance everywhere. Yet when the dreamer sits to eat, the plates hold only dust, or worse, ashes. This is the symbol of love that speaks of nourishment but offers nothing. It is intimacy in appearance, only a facade that hides emptiness beneath its polished surface. For the empath, this dream is not a metaphor alone, but a lived reality. They are often invited into closeness with promises of devotion, words rich with tenderness, gestures suggesting true connection. But beneath the surface, what they encounter is consumption rather than reciprocity. The other feeds on their openness, their compassion, their willingness to feel deeply while giving little or nothing in return. The cruelty of this dynamic lies in its disguise. To the empath, it looks like love, it sounds like love, yet its substance is hollow. Worse still, when the empath shines when their natural radiance surfaces, the ashes multiply, because their very light intensifies the envy within the other. What once attracted now becomes unbearable, and the banquet of intimacy turns into a hall filled with resentment and pretense. This is why so many empaths find themselves bewildered, asking why the warmth they pour into others does not come back to them. The answer lies in the banquet of ashes they have mistaken false love for real nourishment. And until they can discern the difference, they risk sitting at tables that look abundant but leave the soul starving. Envy is never just a personal flaw. It is the rebellion of the shadow against what it cannot face. For those who live behind the mask of persona, polished, controlled, socially, the presence of an empath is unsettling. The empath embodies authenticity, a raw immediacy of feeling that strips away the facade. And when the persona feels threatened, the shadow stirs, whispering not of admiration but of destruction. This rebellion does not emerge as open hostility. It comes disguised, layered beneath affection, cloaked in gestures of closeness. Yet its true intent is to protect the shallow self from the terror of depth. To stand before someone who feels fully is to be reminded of one's own numbness. The unconscious cannot endure this mirror without protest, and so it rebels not by confronting its own void, but by seeking to diminish the one who reflects it. For the empath, this means their very existence becomes an uninvited challenge. They awaken in others the awareness of unlived life, of emotions avoided, of truths denied. The shadow resents this call to individuation, for it demands work, dissent, and transformation. Rather than accept the summons, many choose to resist, and envy becomes the weapon of that resistance. Thus, envy should be seen not only as a personal wound, but as an archetypal force. It is the collective shadow lashing out against authenticity. When love is poisoned by envy, what we witness is not merely one person's insecurity, but the age-old struggle between pretense and truth. And the empath, standing in their sensitivity, becomes the unwilling battlefield where this rebellion plays out. For the empath, survival has never been about shutting down their sensitivity. Their gift was born in openness, and to build walls around the heart would be to betray that essence. Yet without protection, the empath risks being endlessly drained by those who mistake their compassion for something to exploit. The challenge, then, is not to harden, but to create what might be called sacred thresholds, boundaries that honor both self and other. A wall isolates. It says, "You will never enter." A boundary, in contrast, is a living gate. It allows love to flow where love is true, but stops the subtle erosion of envy disguised as devotion. To set a boundary is not cruel. It is clarity. It is the recognition that your light must be preserved if it is to continue illuminating. Without such care, the gift becomes exhausted, and the empath risks losing the very capacity that makes them whole. Too often, empaths fear that saying no means they are unkind. But in truth, boundaries are acts of love for the self that must remain intact, and love for others who need to confront their own shadows rather than siphon life from someone else's. To deny them this confrontation is not mercy, but collusion in their avoidance. When an empath claims their right to boundaries, something remarkable happens. They no longer live as victims of envy's hidden sabotage. They step into sovereignty. They become a light that shines without apology, a flame that can endure because it burns with steadiness rather than sacrifice. This is the turning point where empathy transforms from unconscious wound into conscious vocation. The tragedy of the empath is often captured in myth. Consider Echo, the nymph who gave her voice to reflect another's words, fading slowly because her love for Narcissus was never returned. In many ways, empaths step into Echo's role, reflecting the needs, moods, and desires of others so completely that their own essence begins to vanish. When they give their love to those who cannot or will not reciprocate, they risk dissolving into silence. Narcissus, transfixed by his own reflection, symbolizes those who cannot truly love another. To such a person, the empath's gift is both irresistible and intolerable. They admire the depth of feeling yet recoil from it, for it exposes their shallow preoccupation with appearances. What emerges is not partnership, but a draining attachment, where the empath pours out energy while receiving little beyond the emptiness of a self-absorbed lover. This same dynamic lives on in the archetype of the psychic vampire. Unlike the romanticized creatures of legend, this vampire does not feed on blood, but on vitality, the compassion, patience, and forgiveness of the empath. They come close not to share light, but to consume it. They take and take until the empath is depleted. Then paradoxically blame the empath for being too emotional or too fragile. Yet even here, the message is not to demonize. The vampire is also a symbol of souls cut off from their own source, searching unconsciously for what they have lost. Their hunger is real, but it cannot be satisfied by draining another. For the empath, the lesson is not to hate these figures, but to recognize the danger of surrendering their essence to them. To continue playing Echo is to fade away. To awaken is to claim a voice that no longer reflects someone else's emptiness, but speaks with the strength of one's own truth. In the inner landscape of empaths, dreams often serve as warnings written in symbols. Many speak of rising waters, of standing in a room as it slowly floods, of being pulled under waves, or of trying to rescue others while they themselves cannot breathe. These dreams reflect the psychic weight of absorbing too much, the overwhelming tide of emotions that threaten to wash away the empath's own identity. They reveal what waking life may deny, that without limits, empathy becomes suffocation. But the psyche does not only speak in images of drowning, it also offers visions of liberation. When the empath begins to awaken, when they dare to set boundaries and reclaim their essence, their dreams shift. Wings appear. They find themselves lifted into the air, soaring above landscapes once filled with floods. The flight is not escape, but transformation. The soul's way of saying freedom is possible, and sensitivity can become the wind that carries you rather than the water that engulfs you. These paired dreams of drowning and of flight are the psyche's twofold message. The first warns, if you keep absorbing without discernment, you will lose yourself. The second promise, if you honor your limits, your gift will lift you higher than you ever thought possible. For the empath, such dreams are not random fragments of the night, but profound mirrors of their inner journey. They call the soul to move from submersion to sovereignty, from being consumed by the waters of others to rising with the wings of their own becoming. At the heart of envy lies projection, the unconscious act of disowning what one cannot accept within themselves and casting it onto another. For the empath, this often sounds like accusations. You're too sensitive. You're unstable. You exaggerate. These words strike deeply, not because they are true, but because they come from the very people who claim to love. What is really happening is inversion. The fragility belongs not to the empath, but to those who cannot face the rawness of their own inner life. Jung saw projection as one of the psyche's most common defenses, and nowhere is it more visible than in the bonds between empath and false lover. The empath's gift exposes truths that others repress, stirring an unease they can neither name nor confront. Rather than admit, I am fragile, they declare, you are fragile. Rather than confess, I fear my emotions, they accuse, you feel too much. In this way, the shadow avoids responsibility by shifting its weight onto the most open soul in the room. This is why envy so often appears in the guise of concern. It slithers quietly, like a serpent, moving between words and silences, wrapping itself around intimacy until warmth begins to constrict. In ancient traditions, the serpent symbolized both wisdom and poison, transformation and destruction. So it is with envy, it can be the venom that corrodes love, or, when recognized, it can reveal where the shadow has been denied and where growth is possible. For the empath, the lesson is to see projection clearly and to refuse its poison. You are not too much. You are precisely as sensitive as your soul requires. The serpent's bite is dangerous only when it goes unnoticed. Once named, its power weakens, and what was once a threat can become insight. To meet envy with clarity is to take back the mirror, to recognize that what has been cast onto you belongs not in your heart, but in the unacknowledged depths of the other. The language of alchemy offers a profound map for understanding the empath's struggle with envy. The old masters spoke of nigredo, the blackening, the stage when everything familiar begins to dissolve into shadow. It is a time of breakdown, disorientation, and descent, yet it is also the necessary beginning of transformation. Without the darkening, no gold could ever be born. Most people resist this descent. They cling to the mask of persona, terrified of allowing their carefully constructed identity to fall apart. But the empath, by nature or by wound, has already walked through such darkness. They know what it is to grieve, to feel despair, to stand face to face with the depths and not shatter. This is why their presence becomes unbearable to those who refuse the descent, because the empath embodies proof that the journey into shadow is survivable, even redemptive. Here lies the paradox of envy. The one who resents the empath does so because the empath carries what they cannot, the courage to feel, to endure the blackening, and to transmute pain into compassion. To encounter an empath is to be confronted with the very process of transformation that others spend a lifetime avoiding. Their envy is not of beauty, wealth, or status, but of the soul's resilience, the ability to walk through negrito and emerge with something luminous. The empath's gift, then, is alchemical. They take what was once unbearable and turn it into presence, into care, into light. But unless they see this clearly, they will continue to be punished for their very capacity to survive the descent. To embrace the alchemy of shadow is to recognize that their sensitivity is not weakness. It is the sign that gold is being forged within. The struggle between light and envy is not new. It is one of humanity's oldest stories, echoing across cultures and ages. In the tale of Cain and Abel, it was Abel's innocence and favor that provoked his brother's rage, a violence born not of want but of resentment. In the story of Joseph, the young dreamer was despised by his brothers not for any crime, but because his visions revealed a gift they themselves did not possess. And in the Christian mystery, even Christ's radiance was met not only with devotion, but with envy from those whose power trembled before authentic light. These myths endure because they reveal an archetype that continues to live in every empath's experience, to carry light, to walk with sincerity, to live openly in the presence of truth. These qualities inevitably stir unease in those who remain attached to masks. The empath awakens in others the recognition of what has been buried, and envy rises as defense, just as it did in the stories passed down for millennia. For the empath, this knowledge is sobering but also liberating. To be met with envy is not simply a personal misfortune, it is to participate in a universal drama. It is to stand in the lineage of those whose authenticity revealed the shadows of their time. This does not mean the empath must suffer endlessly, but it does mean their struggle belongs to something larger, something timeless. Understanding this places the empath's pain in context. It is not only about one broken relationship or one false promise of love, it is about the recurring tension between authenticity and pretense, between the soul's light and the shadow's rebellion. To recognize this is to see that the empath's journey is not a curse, but a calling, woven into the very myths that shaped human consciousness. For the empath, the cycle of false love is painfully familiar. Give deeply, be absorbed, then be punished for the very gift that was once cherished. It is a pattern that repeats itself until the empath begins to believe that love is supposed to feel like diminishment. Yet this is the great illusion that must be broken. False love survives only when it is mistaken for nourishment, when the empath continues to confuse envy's hunger with devotion. The first step in breaking this cycle is recognition. To see clearly that not every hand that reaches for you offers love. Some reach because they crave your light, not because they wish to share theirs. And once the pattern is seen, the empath faces a choice to continue playing the sacrificer, absorbing what is not theirs to carry or to step away and reclaim their essence. This act of refusal is not betrayal. It is not cruelty. It is an act of truth. By withdrawing consent to be drained, the empath dismantles the false contract that envy demands. In doing so, their empathy ceases to be an unconscious wound, driving them into toxic bonds, and instead becomes a conscious gift guided by discernment. Breaking the cycle does not mean abandoning love altogether. On the contrary, it makes true love possible. For only when the empath no longer accepts ashes in place of bread, only when they refuse to confuse sabotage with affection, can they make space for relationships that honor their depth. This is the threshold where pain begins to turn into wisdom, where the empath learns that their worth is not measured by how much they endure, but by how faithfully they protect the sacredness of their own soul. Every empath carries not only light, but also a shadow. Hidden beneath the longing to heal is often an unspoken desire to be indispensable, to be the one who saves. This inner drive, though born from pain, binds the empath to relationships steeped in envy. The false lover needs to feed, and the empath, hungry to be needed, offers themselves willingly. It is a tragic mirror. One envies the light, the other clings to dependence, and both remain trapped in a cycle of unconscious exchange. Liberation begins when the empath turns inward and faces this shadow directly. To admit, "I am not here to save, I am here to be whole," is both terrifying and transformative. It requires laying down the identity of the sacrificer, surrendering the illusion that love is secured through endless giving. In this moment, the empath encounters the abyss, the dark night of not knowing who they are without the role of caretaker. Yet this abyss is not annihilation. It is the threshold of sovereignty. Dreams often mirror this passage. The empath may see themselves lying in a coffin, being buried, or watching an old version of themselves dissolve. These are not dreams of doom, but of rebirth. They signal that the old self, the one enslaved by the need to rescue, must die so that a new self may rise. Out of this death emerges the sovereign empath, one who feels deeply yet stands firmly, who loves with openness yet guards their essence, who offers compassion without erasing themselves. Sovereignty does not strip empathy away, it refines it. It transforms sensitivity from a wound that bleeds into a power that shines. When the empath accepts their shadow and releases the compulsion to be needed, they step into a new kind of freedom. They are no longer defined by sacrifice, but by authenticity, no longer bound by dependency, but guided by discernment. In this sovereignty, empathy becomes not a curse, but a conscious vocation that honors both self and other. When the empath steps into sovereignty, something shifts at the core of their relationships. No longer confused by mixed signals, they begin to see envy for what it is not love, but shadow in disguise. And with that clarity, the grip of false love loosens. The accusations "you've changed," "you're selfish," "you're too much" no longer pierce the way they once did, because the empath understands that such words are the cry of envy losing its host. This awakening creates space for a different kind of love to appear. True love doesn't recoil from radiance, it delights in it. It does not resent another's depth, it celebrates it. Where false love drains, true love nourishes. Where envy seeks to diminish, true love calls forth even more of who you are. For the empath, this kind of love may feel rare, almost foreign, because it asks nothing but authenticity. Yet it exists, and it can only be recognized when the confusion between envy and devotion is finally dissolved. Dreams of flight often accompany this stage of transformation. The empath who once dreamed of drowning now dreams of wings soaring above the old cycles, seeing life from a new vantage. These dreams are the psyche's way of affirming you are no longer bound to the waters of suffocation. Your sensitivity can be the very force that carries you higher. To know true love, the empath must first choose themselves. They must protect their light, honor their gift, and hold their boundaries as sacred. Only then can they welcome relationships that reflect the same authenticity. True love does not fear your sensitivity. It rejoices because it recognizes in your light the echo of its own. And when such love is found, the empath finally experiences what their soul has always longed for: connection without diminishment, intimacy without pretense, love without envy. At the end of this long journey, the empath arrives at a revelation envy was never theirs to carry. It was never proof of weakness, never a measure of worth. It was the shadow's rebellion, projected onto their openness. To finally see this is to awaken to recognize that the task of the empath is not to appease envy, but to protect their own light. This awakening is the threshold of individuation, the very process Jung described as becoming whole. For the empath, individuation means reclaiming the wound that once defined them, no longer as a curse but as a calling. It means transforming sensitivity from unconscious compulsion into conscious choice, to feel deeply, but not be consumed, to give freely, but not be drained, to love fully, but never mistake sabotage for devotion. The path is not without loneliness. To step away from false love is to leave behind the familiar comfort of ashes disguised as bread. Yet in this solitude lies strength. In standing firm within themselves, empaths discover that their depth is not fragility, but initiation, that their light cannot be extinguished by the envy of another. This is the call of individuation, to walk with dignity, to embrace the totality of shadow and light, and to refuse to betray the self for the comfort of pretense. And in doing so, the empath not only frees themselves, but becomes a mirror of authenticity in a world starved for it. To all who have traveled with us through this reflection, thank you. Your presence here is part of the same journey, and your support is what makes it possible to bring these explorations to life. If this message has touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters more than you know. And if you wish to continue walking this path together, subscribe so you won't miss the stories and insights still to come. Until then, may you guard your light, honor your depth, and remember true love does not envy. I'll see you in the next video.